morning, everyone. It truly is a good morning. We're here at the Capitol before the start of the legislative session with Representative Mark Kinner for another episode of the Leading Wyoming podcast. So Mark, thank you for making time for us.
You're welcome, Mandy. Yeah, happy to visit.
Well, wonderful. Well, tell me a little bit about where we're standing, and also a little bit about what it's like to be back in the new Capitol, or in the restored Capitol, I should say.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really cool to be here in the historic chamber, the Territorial Chamber actually, and it's really kind of cool for me to think about that in this place, people would have made the decision to have Wyoming become a state, and all the things that went into that and those discussions. And so I enjoy coming here just for quiet reflection and thought about Wyoming, the past, but also the future.
Sure. Awesome.
Yeah, and then you asked about the Capitol. It is so amazing to be back here and to see the history and to think that they've restored it to what it would have looked like at the turn of the century, or really more especially when we became a state. And so that's really pretty cool.
It is really awesome to walk around the halls and feel that history.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've shared this with several Leadership Wyoming classes, but tell me again your story of how you ended up in the House of Representatives and the role Leadership Wyoming played in that.
Okay. Well, it really did play a big role, and I was fortunate enough to be in the class of 2005. And like all others, we want to volunteer and make the very best for our own communities. Well, during Leadership Wyoming, I really thought about the state and how could I help the state. And it was up in Jackson, in the Jackson session, when they talked about being a trustee for our state. And if you really think about it, we're all trustees for Wyoming, right? Really? And so I thought about that, but it was the definition of being a trustee that really got a hold of me and really said, that's it, that's it. And the definition, the end of the definition is, it's about enhancing conditions for those that will never know and a time will never see. Yeah, those will never know and a time will never see. That's it, you know. It's, and we talk about leaving it a better place, those kinds of things, but that so really that folds into my work here, I think, because we deal with a lot of issues that really will lead us into the future, and we probably will never know some of the results of what we're doing here, but the decisions will last far into the future. And so that's why it's really important that we get it right, you know, for those folks who come after us.
Awesome. And your step into the House of Representatives was a little bit unique. You didn't necessarily start by just campaigning. So talk a little bit about your decision, and maybe if your classmates at Leadership Wyoming played a role in that journey as well.
Okay, so yes, that's another part of my story actually. So at the end of our class, of our leadership class, we all get together and talk about what it meant to us. And honestly, at that time, I promised my class that I would serve in the Wyoming legislature, that it made that big of an impact on me and my life that I felt like I needed to serve and to give back to the people. So I'd planned for 10 years.
This was in 2005.
That was in 2005, and it was not until 2015 that I actually got into the legislature. And here's what happened. Sadly, a representative from my district, John Patton, passed away after serving only 1 year. So they advertised to fill that vacancy. So in the matter of a couple of hours, few hours, overnight actually, Tibby and I and my family made the decision to retire from 40 years in banking.
Wow. And
to throw my name in the hat for the consideration for the legislature to fill that position.
Sure.
And I'm really thankful that they decided to choose me. I mean, how silly would that have been?
Do you think you would have got you?
Yeah,
just kidding.
I'm retired. Oh yeah, no, take that back, right? Do over, redo.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and I thought, and it was really kind of neat. So I did come down here before we moved out of the Capitol and took my oath of office here, and that was my only experience
that was it. Wow.
Until coming back. So for 4 years I've served 4 sessions, but not here in the Capitol.
Sure.
The work is the same, the meaning is the same, but it doesn't feel the same, right? Because here you feel the past and you can sense our future.
Well, and the setting matters. We talk about this in Leadership Wyoming under the old curriculum, the idea of sort of hospitable space, and in gracious space, we talk about the setting and what it brings out in people and how it makes people feel. And it does feel very different than, the Jonah building served a great purpose, but it does feel very different to be in here. And I think, so another interesting thing you touched on that we talk about a lot in the state is a citizen legislature and the value of having people who have careers and families and are involved in their communities. And at the same time, it took you making a decision to retire to make this possible, because it wouldn't have been possible under your former job in banking. And so maybe talk a little bit about the dichotomy of that, or sort of what that means for Wyoming, pros and cons as well.
So for me, that you're right, that was the case. I had to get in a position where I could retire because I couldn't have done it. And so I worry about that we have folks who could serve, but because of the way it's set up now, how did it become set up this way? Well, really, a lot of the early folks in Wyoming were ranchers, right?
Sure.
And so it made sense to have the legislature at this time of year because there isn't a whole lot of going on. Some of them may begin to calve or whatever, but so it made sense. I wish that it was a little more available for people, especially younger people, but younger people starting out in their careers, I'm not sure how they could do it, Mandy.
Several months of the year.
And moms, how does a mom, mom can't take their children away from school and things like that. We have several moms serving in the legislature that have children, but they live here in Cheyenne.
Sure.
And so that's a cool thing. They can go home and be with their kids, unless we're working late or whatever. But they can still kind of have a little bit of a normal family life. But I wish that were a little different.
Yeah, it seems like one of the benefits and consequences of citizen legislature, and we make the most of it. And I think it's changing. I was actually staying with two friends here in town who are both attorneys, and I was watching them both have careers that are taking off, and watching them co-parent and watching them manage their kids and their jobs and jump in. And I think that the roles of that are changing a little bit, and there will be some shift as maybe that generation ages into retirement and can take on the legislature. And I think it will look different over time, or it brings me hope that more things are possible.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Well, that's exciting to hear. And I would certainly encourage that. I enjoy visiting with groups of young kids when they come here. In fact, we just visited with little Charlie downstairs.
We did, we did. And Charlie McGinley from Casper.
And he looks so sharp with a tie on, and I said, Charlie, maybe someday you'll serve here.
Sure.
And I love to plant those seeds with any classes that come, especially the young ladies that come.
Yeah.
Because we certainly could use more women in the legislature, being the equality state, right? And our numbers are not good in that respect. So every chance I get, I plant seeds for those young ladies to think about that, and that they can too be leaders of our state.
It feels accessible. Yeah, good for you. Well, tell me a little bit about your transition from banking to being a legislator. There are often attorneys or people who work in state government or have more familiarity with the process and the bills and that sort of thing. So what was your learning curve like? And now that you are is this your fifth session?
This is my fifth one, yeah.
Fifth session in. And now you're on appropriation. So just talk about that learning curve and journey a little bit.
So there was a huge learning curve with process, because I really didn't understand the process. The good news for me was that throughout my career, working with other folks and working around our community and doing the many things that you do around our community, the many ways I served Sheridan, you learn a lot about our state, really, and you learn a lot about the issues. But you also have people that you can go to. I call them my go-to people. So when different issues come up, whether it's ag or whatever it might be, or education or community colleges, I know people that I can go to and talk to about the different issues, and that's really helpful. And I think that's where experience really comes in and
40
plays
years
a,
of banking was, you knew how to talk to people.
yeah, well, hopefully, yeah, right. In all kinds of different scenarios,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And but you also got around the state. But Leadership Wyoming really did that too. And then of course, what are we now? Over 800
That's true, yeah.
people and so it's cool to run into people. Or if I have an issue in one part of the state, I might say, hey, who are the leadership grads in that part of the state that
Sure.
I
Yeah,
can
come
call,
to
and they
understand.
can be my go-to people.
Yeah, oh, that's neat. And how about serving on appropriations? How has that process been? And you know, that's a hard committee at this time. And so what's that work felt like for you?
Well, there's a lot of work, but I really take that role very seriously because we are dealing with numbers. Numbers come easy, having served in
Sure.
banking, right?
Yeah.
But the issues are out there. But then when you put a dollar sign with those issues, it does really make it more important. It is a heavy lift. We spent 2 weeks down here just before Christmas and 2 weeks in January. And poor Tibby at home in Sheridan.
Yeah.
I said, Tibby, I will be home for Christmas.
Yeah. She's like, I hope so.
Yeah, so we do spend time at it, and we have budget hearings, and we have all the agencies come and present their budgets to us, and we truly do work and look for ways that we can maybe be more efficient, and how can we do that a little better. But it is a neat process in that it takes the House and the Senate getting together and sharing our thoughts and really kind of coming to a consensus, and we're about to start that with the committees that will get together now on the budget, and so that'll be a huge process going forward, beginning today.
Starting
actually.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so that starts today. So what does that look like on the floor or in committee, or what's kind of the tangible process?
Well, it really happens in committee. And so we're certainly familiar with the players. The House appoints 5 people, the Senate appoints 5 people. The Senate's already chosen their 5 appropriators. The House will be choosing those. I'm one of the newer people on the committee, so I'm not sure if I'll get to serve there, but we'll find that out. And then it's a matter of getting together and looking at the differences. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing. And I'm going to jump back to the budget for just a second.
Sure.
For the first time in recent history, since the legislature's been handled in this way with a 40-20 kind of split, we had the budget on their desks on the very first day of the legislature. That
Wow.
hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And so we worked hard to do that. And now with the budget, there were 15 amendments that were exactly the same. So in other words, the House and the Senate ran this very same amendment. And so that's a very unique situation too.
Sure.
That's the most in recent history.
Sure.
So those items we don't have to debate, right? So now we only have to work on the differences.
And what's that number? Do you know?
In terms of numbers, I'm not sure. I think the Senate maybe had 13 amendments that were a little different, and then I think we had 15. So it's a matter of looking at those and seeing if there's some similarities, and then trying to say, well, how do we do this? And it is a negotiations, and it's just trying to work it out, and that will take place in a conference committee. And then the process is, after we come to an agreement, we need to go back to both bodies. We need to go back to the House and the Senate to get their approval, and of course then we send it off to the governor, right?
Yeah.
And then Governor
cross
Gordon.
your fingers and
Yeah,
pray.
well, and then
Who
yeah.
knows what could happen?
Well, right, and then if he makes a decision to veto something,
Right.
if we really think it's important, we do have the opportunity to go and override that. I don't like to do that,
With a
but
2/3 vote? Is that right?
yeah, it does take a super majority.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, interesting. So we both share a good friend, Tom Scott, in
Yeah,
Dayton, Wyoming.
yeah.
And Tom talks a lot about civility and the lack of civility today. And I think we see that at the national level, and I think we
Yeah.
see it at the local level as well. But I also think when I come down here and I see representatives and senators from around the state working hard to do the best for their constituents. And so talk a little bit about what you do to try to breed civility around you or in the conversations that you're having, or maybe share a few examples of some civility you've seen perhaps like, okay, we have 15 amendments that were brought in the House and the Senate,
Yeah.
and those are a done deal. That doesn't get a lot of media attention.
Right,
So
right.
maybe share an example or two of things you're proud of or things you're trying to bring to this place.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm going to give my wife Tibby some credit for this because one of her favorite sayings is kindness matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really true. And so the thing that we talk about is that we really do deal in some very tough issues, very strong opinions on both sides. But I think we try to do it civilly. We try to not look at the person as the individual, right? Not really hone in on that's a bad person. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about it, then that helps. Mm-hmm. And I was a soccer referee for many years and a football referee, and so I was hoping that when they didn't like a call that I made, that it was the uniform that they were yelling at, right?
Sure,
it wasn't
sure.
the guy
Yeah,
inside the uniform, it was the
pretty
uniform.
good. Yeah.
And so it's a lot like that, I think.
Yeah.
Now, a good practice that we have every morning that we begin with a prayer offered in the house body, but then we have a moment for the Pledge of Allegiance. Then we take a moment and we all go around and say good morning to each other and hello, and that really helps. So the day before we may have disagreed with someone, mm-hmm. but that day we might be working together on a
Sure.
different matter, and so it's an awareness, I think, that's important in thinking about it, and then when the debate gets heated, just sort of take a breath and just, it's not that person that you should be concerned about. It might be the issue, but that person is trying to do what they consider to be the very best for Wyoming. And really, Mandy, I'm encouraged by the fact that I think that here in Wyoming, our legislature still works, and for the most part, Senator Enzi likes to refer to the 80% rule, and we're going to agree on about 80% of the things, and so then let's work on the other 20%, mm-hmm. and so try to move our state forward at the same time.
Yeah. I think sometimes when people come and watch the debate, they don't have that same buy-in to it's not personal. We're going through a process and we've agreed to this process, and so it takes people a little explanation or a little time to understand that it's not a personal attack, and in fact you don't even use the names on the floor
right.
of
because of that. Yeah.
But I think it takes buy-in that it's a process, and then I think I have seen, at least in our own Leadership Wyoming classes, it takes having things outside of that as well, like sharing a meal or sharing a conversation or a
right.
handshake that remind us that we are humans and we can respect each other and work together in different ways on different issues.
Yeah, and I think getting to know each other
mm-hmm.
During the course of the interim, the Appropriations Committee did work on that, and when we were over in our Riverton meeting, we went to Sweeler's in Hudson,
sure.
right?
Yeah, that'll build community
amazing place
among
for
any
dinner,
group.
right?
Yeah.
But got to know each other, and we went around the room and talked about our background a little bit, and
sure.
that really helped. And we've had a meal here together in Cheyenne, and
mm-hmm.
so it just helps if you get to know someone. Mm-hmm. Then you can understand where they're kind of coming from,
sure.
and not hold it against them on that particular issue.
Sure. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I have a little bit of a surprise question for you.
Okay, cool.
Which is that I've been digging up the applications of our Leadership Wyoming participants from when they applied to Leadership Wyoming, and reading, most people say reading a quote or two from their application.
Oh no, do you have one from me?
I do, yeah. And I think it's really telling of where you are, and I'd be curious to get a check on how you think you and the legislature are doing. Because in applying for the class of 2005, so over 15 years ago now, you wrote, "What is the greatest opportunity for Wyoming?"
Okay.
And you said, "The most notable opportunity for Wyoming is the development of our state and the protection of our future by responsible management of mineral income and our natural resources." So, protection of our future by responsible management of our mineral income and natural resources. What do you think? How are we doing 15 years later?
It's really funny because those issues are right there in front of us right now.
Yeah. And
I
a lot
think,
has
as you know-
happened in that time to end up at, we could say the same question today, a
Right.
boom, bust, boom, and here we are today.
Yeah. So I think, as you know, I helped start the land trust in Sheridan, and it's doing quite well. And that was all about a balance for me. The balance in that we wanted things like open space. We wanted to have a place for some of our animals and things like that, but a place to walk. And so trails and open space and preserving our history. And so but it was about balance. In a similar time, I was serving on the board of Forward Sheridan, which was our economic development organization, and people didn't quite understand, how could you do both of those? Well, it really was about balance. We don't want to develop everything,
right.
But yet we need enough growth to stabilize our economy, and I see that for our state as well. And of course, one of the big issues right now is the possible purchase of 1 million acres of land in southern Wyoming. Well, what does that mean for our future? I heard someone say that this would be the largest purchase of a governmental entity since the U.S. purchased Alaska. So if you think about that, that's like
crazy.
Wow, it is kind of crazy, but it's maybe a neat opportunity. But as you know, where is the future of all of our energy that we produce? What does that mean for Wyoming? We see the decline in coal. We're concerned about what's going to happen. Well, gas, because of all the gas that's been found and developed, the gas prices are way down there. So petroleum as well, the oil that we're producing. So we need to sort of shift a little bit. And one of the things that I think about in terms of Sheridan, I went to a seminar in Casper, and it was about aerospace, the aerospace industry, right? And so we have many manufacturers that do great things, and so why couldn't they make parts for for a rocket ship or whatever? So there are a lot of opportunities out there. It is going to take time, but I'm very optimistic, and in Wyoming we have found a way in the past, and we will find a way now. But the challenge is to keep, I think, moving forward at the same time that we're dealing with some of these issues. I think if we're not moving forward, then I think we're going backward.
Sure. I think there is no staying
Wow,
static.
It's funny that but
Yeah,
maybe those are the
later.
15 years later, those are the big issues still.
Yeah.
But we'll still work on them, and I guess I'm happy to be in this role now, where I can hopefully have a positive influence on our future here in Wyoming.
Yeah, I imagine that as you wrote that, 15 years ago, hoping you'd get into leadership
Yeah.
Wyoming, you probably didn't imagine you'd be sitting on the appropriations committee
No,
deciding what to do
no.
with that very money.
And even further back, when I was a student at the University of Wyoming, I had no clue that I
You
would.
just wanted to play rugby.
I did. I did back in those days, and yeah. Anyway.
That probably prepared you for this role a little bit as well.
Yeah,
It's a
maybe
bit
be
like
able
a
to take
scrum.
some hits, and it's like right. I can take
Yeah.
those hits and get
Yeah.
back up, and
Yeah.
get knocked down and get back up.
Yeah.
But the issues are right there, and so we're going to continue to work hard on those, and I'm very interested in continuing to serve the people of Wyoming and doing the best. And I love the role that Leadership Wyoming plays. And I almost think to the class when I get to meet a new class, I think, wow, you guys don't even know what's going to happen to you yet, because I know that they'll be impacted, and some in different ways than
Sure.
others. And that doesn't mean they'll all be in the legislature, but really they're all going to be serving Wyoming, and they'll all be trustees for Wyoming. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy watching the new classes come along, and you probably do too.
Oh, it's such a delight.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Usually about halfway through, we get a little feedback from a few people who say, well, I'm not sure I've had my aha moment.
Yeah.
Or I'm waiting for the curriculum or the concept that's going to really change my life. And even just this past session, we had a class member stand up and say, I was that person, and it just occurred to me that I'm changing. Like, the transition is happening in me, and what I want to do and what I feel empowered to do and inspired to do is changing. It's not as though we gave you now I'm giving away the secret of Leadership Wyoming. But it's neat to watch that journey.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for your role.
It's a
as
pleasure.
you know, I've really been excited for you to take over and help us, and your enthusiasm and your excitement for our future is just really important. So
thank you.
Thank you
That's
for
kind.
that.
It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Maybe another exciting piece of news in your world in the last year, that your daughter moved home to Sheridan.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. I mean, we talk theoretically about we want our kids to have a place to come home and jobs to come home, and you sort of watched that process happen a little bit.
Well, yeah, I really did, and recently I've seen it in a couple of other places. And back in the day, I was worried about our kids leaving Wyoming, and my thought over the years has changed a little bit. And I want there to be jobs and opportunities for the kids who want to stay here, because we need that.
Sure.
But those who choose to go away, I know both of my children, sort of wanted to get away, right? But then I want them to have an opportunity to come back, and that's why it's important that we keep looking for other opportunities and keep moving forward, so that those who can. There's a couple of ladies working for the Wyoming Business Council now, and they moved away and then had really good professional careers coming, and then they found opportunities to come back. And that's so exciting for me, because they grew up here, they bring back some ideas with them, but they know a lot about our state, and they really want to take part in our future, and I'm really encouraged by that. And so that's been an interesting transition for me, because I didn't want any kids to leave, but now it's okay. But please come back.
Yeah. That's neat to see. And that sort of reminds me, something else I've heard you talk about in the legislature is openness to the possibility of changing your mind, and not to be wishy-washy and not to change your vote on one day and the next day, but to recognize that conditions might change or information might change that might change how you feel about an issue or a topic. And so that's a more theoretical or philosophical thing of whether kids should leave or come back, but I've heard you represent that even down to a vote too, of knowing that things will come in that may change what your initial perspective was.
Yeah, I think you have to be open to the discussion and listen to the discussion, but in my opinion, it has to be a diverse discussion. And let's look at it from all different angles. And you may, throughout the course of a discussion, or visiting with people, or visiting with your go-to people,
Sure.
you may learn some things that you didn't understand, and that do affect your mind and change your mind sometimes. And so, that doesn't mean flip-flop,
Right.
but that means, if you are aware of some conditions that you weren't aware originally, then go ahead and make the change. And then visiting with other legislators is also helpful too, and people that you respect and that have served, in various capacities. And it's helpful to have a broad range of people serving in the legislature. One of my friends from Casper, Jerry, he's a retired accountant, and so a really great numbers person, and then other people that I'm close to, retired from their industries, and really can be helpful on certain issues.
Sure.
When you look at the breadth of the issues in Wyoming, from water to education to highways to whatever, right? Agriculture.
Yeah.
You can't be an expert,
On
so
everything.
you need those people that you can trust and rely on and count on. And then and I'll just mention this too. The lobby group in Wyoming is really important, and they really do a good job of really telling both sides of the story. They certainly have their opinion, but they'll share both sides of the story, and they do a great job, because and it's not, when we think of lobbyists, right, we think of something maybe not as quite as desirable in Washington, but here that they really play a helpful role.
Yeah, and I think in many ways the lobby sector of Wyoming allows there to not be a staff at the legislature, that there are people who are informed on issues and are helping legislators with their processing or providing information or dialogue or connections to constituents when you don't have any staff person, that plays a role that's valuable. And that is, yes, it's industry paying money for an individual to represent them, but in some ways, because of the kind of people who they are and what they do, it allows our state government to exist without a staff person, per legislator.
Yeah, and being really a citizen legislature, we do not have any staff, and I always chuckle when someone says, "Well, could I visit with your secretary or whatever?"
Sure,
it's
I'm
like,
right here.
or administrative assistant. It's like, okay, that's me.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is powerful. And people always comment when we come to Cheyenne for Leadership Wyoming that the approachability and the proximity that we have to the people who represent us is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And any class member who sends in a note to their local representatives, I'm in the lobby, that representative or senator is like up and out the door of, I want to see you, I want to meet you, I want to talk to you, this is important to me. And I think that is something we can celebrate and be proud of and hold on to.
Well, yes, and I'm excited to have Leadership Sheridan in town today because there are a lot of folks that I know and I want to go visit with them. And in fact, they'll be here in a little while, actually.
Wonderful.
And so that's a thing. Now, let me just mention this. Before we started the legislature, we had a caucus. The whole legislature got together, and I don't think it was quite 90. I think there were one or two that maybe couldn't be there, but say close to 90. But also Senator Enzi, Senator Brasso, Congresswoman Cheney, and Governor Gordon, and all in the same room talking about Wyoming. And where does that happen?
Yeah.
How many places does that happen? Right? Where you can get all the leaders and
it probably felt like a big family of hugs and a few disagreements over the gravy and
right or whatever, but you know each other really, right? And you can kind of call each other by their first name, and that's a huge advantage for Wyoming. And we joke about it all the time, but a small town with long streets, and it really is true when you think about all the connections that we have.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing some of the good things happening and the positive things and the way people are working together, because I think in this day and age we don't always hear those stories, and we want to believe the best, but it's hard to know what that looks like. And so thanks for representing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But one last thing, Mandy, that I think about a lot, and that is that the rest of our families do play a major role, right? Like Tibby's up there shoveling snow and doing all of that and getting stuck in the snowdrift and all that. And so our families do play a huge role, and so I certainly appreciate that support, but also the support from everyone. We get a lot of encouragement from people, and quite honestly, people that offer to send prayers our way, and that's really helpful and needed, actually.
Yeah, it takes a village.
Yeah, it does. So,
well, wonderful.
Yeah,
well, thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely.
Good luck with appropriations today.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be back with another episode of Alumni soon. The Leading Wyoming podcast is possible thanks to the generous support of the Wyoming Dragisevich Foundation and the Wyoming Community Foundation.